Falcoholic live patrons, what is up? Welcome to our May Falcons Q&A session featuring, you guessed it, the patrons. Welcome back, everyone. We're excited to chat with you guys again. This month, I know we missed April. You know, technically, we had like a what was it, like a March 31st, show. So it was, almost April, but technically we didn't have one in April, so we apologize for that. But we're going to have a great show for you here to answer all your questions. I know we got a bunch of questions from Patreon. We got some from the Discord. I know there's some folks joining us in the chat as well. So welcome to everyone. And yeah, I'm excited to talk to you guys. Excited to get to some Falcons talk here in the deadest part of the season. But as you guys are patrons, I know you guys are absolutely following everything that happens with the team at this point as well. So I am joined tonight by the Falcoholic himself. He is Dave Cho. Dave, how are we doing tonight?
Doing great. It's almost June 1st or minus injury. Happy Deion Jones trade day. So welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about that tonight, the Deion Jones trade, whether or not that's still going to go down. That's a good one. It's a good one to drop in there for sure, Dave. Great job.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, that's some fantastic broadcasting right there. That's what everyone they've come to expect this from us now, especially on these Q&As, which are, by far our tightest, most professional shows that we do, for sure. So, without a doubt, no question asked. Also with us tonight, speaking of professionalism, Adnan Ikic, at Say Which Way. Adnan, how are we doing tonight?
I'm feeling very professional tonight.
Exactly. I knew you would. That's why you're here. So to inject some class and some professionalism into this discussion.
Almost showed up in a suit and tie tonight.
I know, I was expecting it, but that's okay. It's okay. We'll get that next time. We'll get that on the suit and tie pod coming soon. We'll talk about our favorite brands. Indochino. I know they're advertising on a lot of podcasts. Indochino, hit us up. Yep. Yeah. I'll wear a suit.
Hey,
I'll wear a suit on pod.
Send us some material.
For sure. Yeah.
Hey, I'm wearing the Twizzler shirt now.
Hey, there you go. Yeah, that's a hashtag brand. We're good at that here on the show, for sure. Yeah, guys. Well, we have, if anyone wants to ask questions in the chat, throw those in. We'll get to as many as we can in this hour. And I know we have questions from other sources as well. So I'll kick things off with Moonstar's question. I don't remember Moonstar's patron handle, but that's who it is on the Discord, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out the Discord yet, it's hopping. There are people in there chatting every single day. I sort of just created it, and basically, I mean, you guys, the fans, took it over. I mean, I think we have 300 people in the Discord now, and you guys are in there chatting every single day. So shout out to you guys. Shout out to everyone keeping it very chill. I've never had to ban anyone or remove any messages or do anything. You guys are so well behaved. I just big props to you guys for that. But speaking of the Discord, from Moonstar, we have a good one. It's an interesting question here. He asks on the subject of tanking for a high draft pick, because that's been talked about a lot. Coach Smith talked about the fact that he believed that draft picks have sort of seen their value decrease in the current NFL climate. So he's asking us, do we see this as just sort of coach speak, or do we think this is actually a legitimate thing that the team believes, that maybe the draft picks and tank, I think he means tanking as one part. Oh, it's Dylan. Okay. Sorry, Dylan. Yeah. Yeah. Specifically tanking and just draft picks in general. I think he's talking about the Rams model, for instance, where they've traded a lot of draft picks away for free agents, later draft picks. Basically, that maybe draft picks are becoming less valuable than they have in the past, and that the Falcons might actually attempt to move toward that sort of strategy. So that's a deep, in-depth question, but I know you guys can handle it. Adnan, you look rearing to go, so I'm going to let you get the first crack at it.
I don't think that draft picks are losing their value. I mean, we did see with the Los Angeles Rams a successful blueprint to sacrificing draft picks and getting success out of it. However, the Los Angeles Rams weren't a team that was in a bad position before then. Remember, they did mess up with the Jared Goff pick, that's for sure. Goff ended up being an okay quarterback that they did get some value out of in the trade for Matthew Stafford. They got one of the best coaches in the NFL, one of the most transcendent offensive minds in the league. They had Aaron Donald on the team already, who was already a very high draft pick as, the best defensive player in NFL. So I guess if you have, the outright best defensive player in the league that you were building around, and you just need a quarterback that you are willing to spend those picks on, then yeah, I guess you can not value draft picks as highly. But I think the Rams were a special case. They got Jalen Ramsey, who was very disgruntled with the Jacksonville Jaguars, who is the best cornerback in the NFL. Players like that don't normally come available who are just the outright best at their position. So props to the Rams for making that move. Quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford don't outright come available the way that he did last offseason, guys who are still at the latter stage of his prime. So props to them for taking advantage of that. The Rams, I don't think that they've devalued the draft pick. I think it's more so that they've stricken while the iron is hot. They've done a great job of scouting these situations and taking advantage of these situations when they came about. So I'm not so definitely if the Falcons, for example, have an opportunity to trade for a true needle mover, a true transcendent talent, that the way the Rams did, then yeah, absolutely move those draft picks. But I wouldn't say trade picks just for the sake of trading picks, because I still think that building through the draft is absolutely the way to solid success more than any other way. And it's the best way to build a team going forward, because, the Falcons will have a lot of cap space next offseason, but they haven't really had much space, the past few years. And that cap will, it'll dry up quickly. So you can't just be building around veterans. The Rams did it and the Rams got away with it, but the Rams are a very, very special case.
Yeah. And like the Rams have shown that it can work, and I agree with everything you said. Like if it works, you can win with any number of strategies if it works. But the Rams started things off by hitting on a lot of these players in the draft. And I think they deserve some props also for realizing that like Jared Goff was a big mistake, and like unfortunately they realized after they'd already paid him, so that didn't necessarily help things. But they were like, we're not going to get there with Goff, even though we gave him this big contract. They traded him for Matthew Stafford, and they had to give up additional resources. But they did it the right way. I don't know how sustainable that is or how repeatable that is. People were trying to win like the Patriots for a long time, and obviously that hasn't worked for anyone else except the Patriots. But I think it's an interesting question, certainly.
And I think that you look at the Rams, they're a team that was making the playoffs despite Jared Goff. They're a team that made the Super Bowl despite their quarterback play.
Yeah.
So then they packaged a couple of picks to upgrade their quarterback, and that was pretty much the last piece of the puzzle for them. So that's a very special circumstance. Like if it was like the Chicago Bears a few years ago, where they were making the playoffs with Mitchell Trubisky, and they were winning the division with Trubisky, I think that's another team where, yeah, sacrifice your draft picks, get a quarterback for the win now stage. But very few teams are in that stage where they're having this, this level of success that the Rams were having despite their quarterback play. The 49ers are another team. That's why they moved all the way up to get Trey Lance. And, they're doing it through the draft, but they did it by sacrificing picks. The Falcons aren't anywhere close to that, just making this a Falcons-centric thing. And there aren't that many teams that are in that position. But when you get to that position where all you need is a quarterback, and some teams do get to that position, maybe they're not so good at scouting quarterbacks, but they're great at putting everything else together. That's when you put all of your chips in the middle of the table and say, all right, forget these draft picks. I'll sacrifice a few years of firsts, but we have a chance to legitimately win a Super Bowl as a result of us doing that.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. I think there's a lot of layers to it, but that's a reasonable place to start. Dave, where do you sort of land on this? Do you favor sort of building through that more old school draft first mentality, or do you think? I mean, we did see the Falcons try to trade a lot of picks, reportedly, for Deshaun Watson, which would sort of lean more towards them, saying, oh, F them picks or whatever. is the what the kids are saying these days. But what do you think about building through the draft versus that sort of aggressive trade your picks for a veteran strategy?
Yeah, I think it really depends where you are in the team building cycle, right? To me, if you are the Falcons as currently constructed, and I know that everybody's kind of riding high after this offseason, but I think we all know, at least deep in our hearts, that this is not the the 2021 Rams, right? Like, this is not a team that can make a couple big trades and a couple of big signings and be like Super Bowl bound. And that's why the Rams did it. And that's why other contenders will try to follow a similar path. But I think the Falcons, based on, Terry Fontenot coming from New Orleans, sort of having that experience where they were always fine with trading picks away, certainly very active in free agency. I can see that team building approach working for them down the line, but it's not going to be until that foundation is fully built and they feel like, and again, Watson was interesting, right? Because that appeared to be the shortcut for quarterback that they were going for. And I think that if Ridder doesn't work out this year, they may still try to take that shortcut and get a veteran. But I think overall, you're looking at a team that's going to try to build a little bit more patiently, start using the money they have in free agency, and they're not really going to throw the picks out the window in favor of veterans for, another couple of years at least.
Yeah, I agree. And that's sort of my preference for team building is through the draft. I think it's more reliable. I think it can be more long term, but again, it depends on you actually hitting on the picks, So you have to hit on the picks. If you're going to stockpile picks and go for that route, you have to actually hit on the picks. So we'll see. The jury's still out on this regime and if they can hit on those picks. Because outside of Kyle Pitts, it's been sort of not what people were hoping. Certainly from the first class. The second class obviously has a ton of promise, and the first class still has a lot of promise. So it's obviously way too early to judge any sort of draft stuff based on 1 year of production. But that's my preference. We'll see how serious the Falcons are about that. I think they're open to pursuing a different path, but I think if they do go for that more like trade away picks for veterans route, it'll probably be like several years in the future when they've actually started to like get close to the playoffs. And maybe if they have early success or like they get it, Ridder ends up hitting and it's like, oh, Ridder's our franchise quarterback and they have this top pick, maybe they don't trade that top pick for another veteran, but maybe they do trade down, get multiple first round picks and then trade one of those for a veteran, player like a big time offensive lineman or defensive lineman or something like that. And go that route, because they have plenty of money to pay someone if they were to do that. So, now, once they have salary cap, that opens the door for more stuff too, because it's like, it's one thing to be like, oh, I want to trade for this veteran, but if you can't pay him, that makes it hard too. So we'll see what happens, but I still think that they're more likely to try to build through the draft, at least for the next like year or two. But going forward, we'll see. I think once you start having success and feeling like you're one piece away, you can see teams do all kinds of crazy stuff. And a lot of times it doesn't work out, but sometimes it does. So, you could say that the Bucs did that too. To some extent. So the Saints have seemed to fail at it. They can't quite get over the hump with all these sort of trade ups and everything and
That's
trading for veterans. Yeah, it's very sad. Very, very sad. I hope they keep trying. Eventually they're just going to get to a draft where they just have no picks and, Mickey Loomis will work his magic somehow. I'm sure. So, all right.
Yeah, as he always has.
He always has.
To spearhead that level of success that franchise has had in having won Super Bowl, which was very controversial.
Yep.
And a bunch of playoff heartbreaks.
Yeah. It's man, it's just at least the one thing the Saints do have is that they at least are winning a lot, but it kind of feels like the early Matt Ryan Falcons where they're just winning, but they just can't like win enough still. So, hopefully they just never get over the hump and they just languish in that forever.
They're definitely not closer to doing so than they were a few years ago.
No, and that's, we could talk about the Saints and do Saints slander all day. I definitely like ruffled some Saints feathers the other day because it's like I just don't see the path to this offensive improvement that everyone just seems to be assuming is going to happen. It's like what I tweeted out, a strong actually Kyle Shanahan doesn't matter energy is coming out of the Saints right now. Like, oh yeah, Sean Payton left, but like it doesn't matter. We're going to be better. It's like that's exactly what Falcons fans said when Kyle Shanahan left. And guess what? It didn't work. It was bad. The offense was nowhere near as good. They struggled. The offense was not better. It was not even as good. So, just saying, like when you lose, as much as we dislike Sean Payton from like a rivalry and personal standpoint, the man was an excellent football coach. I mean, very, very smart, crafty offensive mind. And you don't just replace that with his second in command and just not miss a beat. And also, as much as I like Trevor Penning, Teron Armstead was like the best left tackle in the NFL most years that he played, or close to it. And you're not going to replace him with a rookie in Trevor Penning, who I think is like a good player, but as a rookie, Trevor Penning is going to have a hard time in the NFL. He's coming out of Northern Iowa. He was already a really raw pass protector to begin with. Great run blocker. I'm sure he'll be a very good run blocker still, but Jameis Winston was hobbling around at OTAs. We have no idea when Michael Thomas or Alvin Kamara are going to come back and play. Like, everyone just seems to be assuming the Saints are going to be back in the playoffs, and it's like there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions there. Like, the defense is going to be good, but the defense was great last year too. See how far that got them. Got them to what? 9 wins. So we'll see. But I just think there's some questions.
Contain Tyler Algier, right?
Yes. You can't. You can only hope to contain him because you can't stop him. So. All right, we got one from Ollie. What's up, Ollie? Staying up till 1 in the morning in the UK to watch us tonight, so shout out to Ollie, big time. That's dedication right there. That's hardcore dedication. He says, all right, do you guys think Desmond Ridder wins the quarterback job at any point this season? And if he does, do you think it's more likely that he's showing a lot or that Mariota is showing very little? That's a good one. Dave, I'll let you get the first shot at this one.
I do think absolutely Ridder is going to start at some point this year. I think, in an even competition, it's possible that he pushes past Mariota to start the season. I don't know if it will truly be an even competition. I think the coaching staff is gonna favor having the veteran out there in the early going with how difficult the early part of the schedule is. So I think Ridder is going to have to be really, really good to push his way past Mariota to start the season. But I think, the Falcons, they whiffed on Watson, but they clearly would like to have a long-term solution at quarterback. They're itching to have that. So if you go this whole year without getting Ridder some game action, seeing if he can, run this offense effectively, then I don't know what you're doing unless you're, well on your way to a 1-16 season and you're taking a quarterback, which doesn't seem to be something that the Falcons could possibly know at this point. So to me, it's a question of when, not if. I don't expect Ridder to be out there at the beginning of the season. And I think it's not going to be a reflection of him, not being good enough to get past Mariota or anything like that. I think it's just going to be the veteran's going to have a little bit of a leg up. The Falcons are not going to want to, as Arthur Smith has put it, sort of, with people wanting a quarterback and trading Matt Ryan last year, like not going to put a rookie out there to get pounded. They haven't improved the offensive line or the offense enough to think that that's not going to happen. When you got the Saints, the Rams, the Bengals, and a bunch of good teams in the first 7 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to see him. I just don't know when. I mean, Mariota's not bad. Like, Mariota's not just going to stink it up in camp to the extent that I think, like, Ridder... Like, if Ridder has some sort of Herculean effort in camp and he's just, like, blowing the doors off everyone and all that, that's a good problem to have, and then maybe he wins it that way, but I don't think he's going to just waltz in because Mariota is so bad. Like, this isn't a Sam Darnold situation where Matt Corral might literally just walk into a starting job because it's Matt Corral. Like, all he has to do is beat Sam Darnold. This is, like... It's sad for the Panthers that, like, we're talking about the Falcons picking up some random quarterback off the street in Marcus Mariota, who, to be fair, is very talented. Okay, no slander to Marcus Mariota, but, like, the Panthers traded a bunch of assets for Sam Darnold, and Marcus Mariota, I think, is, like, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 GMs would take Marcus Mariota over Sam Darnold right now. So, like, Ridder's not walking into that sort of situation. It's not going to be that easy, but I do think we're going to see him at some point. I think I would be pretty disappointed if we didn't, unless the Falcons are, like, either the worst team in existence or they're, like, in the playoffs, and Marcus Mariota is great, and it's like if Marcus Mariota is great, it's like, I'm sorry, Ritter, like I really like you, but if Marcus Mariota is playing awesome, you're not going to bench him. Like you're just, you found your quarterback. It's Marcus Mariota. There you go. So, but that doesn't mean that Ritter doesn't have any value, that he's never going to have a chance to see the field. It's just like, just you hope that one of them is so good that it answers all your questions. If it's Mariota, fine. If it's Ritter, great. Just, I hope one of them is good, basically, is what I'm saying. But Adnan, where do you sort of land on that? What do you think Ritter's going to end up starting this year?
Most likely, yeah. I think the only way that he doesn't see the field is, like you said, if the Falcons are just playing so well and Marcus Mariota is uh, just slinging it out there, and he's carrying this team into legitimate playoff contention in the into the second half of the season. Then, you'd be doing the veterans on this team and the fan base and the entire team a disservice by pulling him for a rookie just for the sake of pulling him for a rookie. But if the Falcons, are kind of faltering a little bit in the second half, if they're falling out of playoff contention, which I think they will be, then I think you definitely do, see what you have with Desmond Ridder a little bit. And, like Dave said, that offensive line right now isn't very solid. They're not great. I think the offensive line next season will definitely be much better after what expect to be some good free agent signings with
Mm.
all that cap space. So you don't really want to, throw Ritter out there to the Wolves right away, where he could potentially get ravaged behind the likes of Jalen Mayfield along this offensive line. We saw what happened with David Carr in Houston, where he was a high draft pick, and he just never really recovered psychologically from the beating he took with the Texans. Um, so you kind of want to give you want to give Ritter some time to sit. You want to potentially give that offensive line some time to really gel, to work through some of their issues. And uh, also the fact that Marcus Mariota already knows Arthur Smith's playbook, that gives him a massive leg up
Mm.
to start right away. I'm sure Arthur Smith will want to get off to the best possible start in year two following the 7-1 season, especially with week one being against the New Orleans Saints. But Arthur Smith, uh, he has benched Marcus Mariota in the past. I don't see why he would kind of hesitate to do so again if the circumstances call for it. And those circumstances, again, being that the Falcons are kind of faltering in the second half and trying to see what they have. And I think that unless this team makes the playoffs, it would be a disappointment, and it would be a missed opportunity to not at least see what you have with Ritter on the field, because we can we can look at what he does in practice. We can read the reports. The coaching staff can, watch him Monday through Friday every single week, but none of that will really answer any legitimate questions. The only thing that'll answer those questions is seeing how he does in actual game action against legitimate NFL competition. So it would behoove the Falcons to see if he's got it, in his rookie
Mm.
season. And one of two things will happen. Either we'll come away very satisfied, and the coaching staff will come away very satisfied with Ritter and say, yeah, that's the guy that could legitimately be the franchise quarterback. Or we'll come away from it saying, yeah, Ritter isn't really the guy, but at least we know that now.
Yeah.
At least we know not to really build around him and not to fully invest in him. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a make or break, rookie season. If he does poorly in his rookie season, then he's going to have a terrible NFL career. But you at least want to see some of those flashes. You want to see what he's got on that field a little bit, and you want to be able to properly evaluate him against legitimate NFL competition and legitimate game action. But again, if Marcus Mariota is carrying this team to the playoffs, then so be it with that missed opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of those things. And the other thing is, like, The Falcons, I think, will certainly consider drafting a quarterback next year, but a lot of it's going to depend on how those quarterbacks in the draft look and also where they are. Like, we might get to the point where it's like CJ Stroud is the clear-cut QB1 and like this elite prospect, but the team at number 1 is probably taking him in that case, right? The Falcons are picking 5th. If they're not pulling off some sort of massive trade up, they're probably not going to be able to draft him anyway. And then it's like you're looking at sort of some second tier guys. Are you trying to get up for a second tier guy, or are you taking one of these second tier guys over Desmond Ridder, who you liked? Maybe you still are, but maybe you'd rather have Will Anderson or somebody else, in that spot. So it's just a lot of it will depend, next year on where they're drafting and how this quarterback class shakes out into the final decision. So we have a long way to go before we can really seriously have a great look at that. But it's something to keep in mind. Or we got Brandon Brass with an easy, quick question here. Any interest in trading a late round pick to the Jaguars for wide receiver Marvin Jones? I love Marvin Jones. He's been like a low-key fantasy, just reliable guy that I've had a lot of years in fantasy football. I think he's a good player. I don't think the Falcons will have interest in Marvin Jones because he's 32. I think his cap hit for the team trading for him would be like $6 million. And I just think where this team is, and honestly, the wide receiver core is like Marvin Jones would make the roster. Certainly, he'd probably be the wide receiver 2 or 3. But just him being 32, them having to spend that kind of money on him in a season where they're probably not going to be that competitive. I just feel like the Falcons are probably satisfied more or less with their receiver group right now. And they want to see like if any of these guys they brought in can be a future piece for them. And if you bring in Marvin Jones, you're just not going to get to see these guys. Like, you're just bringing in a veteran that's going to take all these snaps, and you don't know, like, can Damiere Byrd be like your wide receiver 3 long term? Can Auden Tate be something? Can he stay healthy? Kaderel Hodge, can he develop more as a receiver, or is he just a special teams guy? Olamide Zaccheaus, is he in your future plans? Like, all these questions, you can't really answer them if you're stuffing your receivers behind Marvin Jones. And like, if they were really trying to be like, if they were like a piece away, like really pushing for the playoffs and had us, and needed the depth, I think that would make sense. But for where this team is, I guess I kind of think probably not interested. Do you guys have any takes on that sort of trade?
I mean, they just traded for Brian Edwards, a late round pick, so I think that's kind of off the table now.
Yeah, Brian Edwards is a lot cheaper and a lot younger.
Yeah, that makes more sense. But yeah, like, I think Marvin Jones can definitely be that wide receiver 2 piece for a contender, someone that's really just like a wide receiver away, or among other things, a wide receiver away. But yeah, I don't think the Falcons fall into that category, at least not for a few years.
Yeah. Dave, you got any additional thoughts there, or similar to where we stand?
Yeah, similar. Like, the only thing I would be in favor of adding, veteran wise, is somebody who's going to help a huge weakness spot get through the year, like adding a left guard, potentially adding another pass rusher. But I think wide receiver, like, you got a pretty young group. You're probably on the cusp of contending, if you're going to contend at all this year. Like, to me, this is not the year I would look to get somebody like Marvin Jones in the door. Maybe next year.
Yeah. I like Marvin Jones, the player. I don't like him necessarily coming to Atlanta at $6 million. I just don't think he's got like a long-term future here. I think he's more of a guy that is going to get traded to like a contender, who could actually let him like win something this year. Yeah, no offense to the Falcons. I think they'll win some games, but I think Marvin Jones probably would rather go to like a Chiefs team, that might need another veteran, especially if there's an injury and that sort of thing. So, sort of where we stand on that. Jonathan Wiggins next up, echoing Dave's point here. Do we add to the offensive line? Specifically, I think you mean left guard, Wiggins. He said right guard, but I think he means left guard. Before the end of the offseason, do we add to the offensive line, specifically left guard? Dave, since you were just talking about it, do you think they actually will bring in a left guard at some point? Or a center, like a versatile guy, anything, really?
I think there's a strong chance of it. I really think it might be later in the summer. I think they want to get a long look at Mayfield and actually see where he's at. I said it multiple times last year in this offseason, like they didn't, they had to play Mayfield ultimately, but I think they felt like it was unfair that they had to throw him into the fire after they kind of yanked him around the lineup, in preseason and training camp. And I think they left him in there with a plan, because you have to remember Josh Andrews came back healthy at one point. Colby Gossett, when he filled in week 17, was clearly capable enough. So to me, all indicators are they would like Mayfield to be their long-term starting left guard. So I think if he comes to camp and he looks really good to them, maybe they add somebody just to push him a little bit harder. But I think it's going to depend entirely on where he's at. I think if we find out, he's looks like Jalen Mayfield from last year, and all of the 16 games worth of beatings that he took, and by extension Matt Ryan took, didn't make a huge difference, then yeah, they'll add somebody. But I think there's a pretty good chance, because I don't expect Mayfield to suddenly be great, that we're going to see a signing before the summer's up. I just don't think there's anybody in-house who's really a strong contender to push him for a starting spot. I just don't think Elijah Wilkinson or, Justin Schaefer in his rookie season are those guys.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. What do you think, Adnan? You think we're gonna get a left guard at some point? Hopefully, maybe.
I think that they'll give Mayfield his opportunity, because as bad as he was, and he was really bad, he did get he did get a bad draw, and that was on the coaching staff last year for sure. They drafted him with the idea that he's going to be the guard. Then they gave him right tackle reps throughout all of training camp, and they gave him a lot of tackle reps. Uh, and the thing is, the offensive line was apparently doing so poorly that in training camp they just put them all the way over there,
Yeah,
fully
they
away
hid
from
them.
the fan base.
Yeah.
Yeah, completely like hid them.
Yeah.
So it'll be telling if they start hiding the offensive line again this year. Um, but you essentially did not give Mayfield the necessary reps. And then you just threw him into week one against Fletcher Cox, and then in week two against Vita Vea. And then he actually did really well in week three against Leonard Williams and the New York Giants. But I think that the team will I I think that they may punt on the left guard position a little bit, just because they couldn't fill in every single hole. And I think this goes back to that point of not wanting to throw Ritter into, in behind this offensive line, and kind of letting Marcus Mariota be that sacrificial lamb, so to speak. But Marcus Mariota is making $6 million to do so. So, I'll get beat up behind a bad offensive line for that kind of money too.
Yeah.
Um, but I think if Mayfield plays so poorly, to the point of where he was last year, then I think that they really won't have much of a choice but to yank him at some
Mhm.
point. And I don't think that leash will be super long. But I think week one, Jalen Mayfield will be lining up at left guard.
Yeah. I think so too. I mean, I really want them to sign someone, even if it's just a depth guy. But like, if you look at the depth chart, like it's pretty. I mean, it's pretty crowded. I mean, not necessarily with guys that you're like itching to start, but with them drafting Justin Schaefer, like right now, like I'm doing, my roster predictions, and it's like, if they sign another guard, it's like, does Justin Schaefer even make the roster then? Like, because you've got Jalen Mayfield and Drew Dahlman and Justin Schaefer and Matt Hennessy and Chris Lindstrom. Like, you've got all these interior guys already. You've got four, interior guys. And like that leaves you, if you're going to carry 9 offensive linemen, that's a lot of interior guys you're trying to cobble together here. That's 5 interior guys actually, but like you've already got your backup center in Drew Dahlman, and then Justin Schaefer, maybe he's your other guard, but like you need some tackles too. They have Jermaine Ifedi and Elijah Wilkinson along with Caleb McGarry. It's like it starts to get really crowded. They sign another veteran. like, does Justin Schaefer make the roster? Does Drew Dahlman or Jalen Mayfield get cut if Justin Schaefer like makes the roster over them? Do they keep 10 offensive linemen? I mean, it's possible, but I think they desperately need to sign another offensive lineman. There are some names out there, certainly. Eric Flowers, famously not a very good tackle, but he played left guard last year for Washington and was actually pretty good. I think he was like a 70 something on PFF, which was like his best ever season. So, I think Flowers is certainly somebody that I would consider. He's certainly, got the size that they like. I would have to look up his overall RAS to see, if he's like, athletic enough for the zone blocking scheme. But Quinton Spain's another guy, that definitely has played in the zone blocking scheme. He's played in Arthur Smith's offense before. Just 31. You know what Quinton Spain was making last year? $1.1 million. He played 90% of snaps for the Bengals last year. He was like the only good interior player they had. I'd give Quinton Spain a call, certainly. I mean, Flowers would be more expensive. Spain would probably be pretty cheap. But I would sign one of those guys in a heartbeat. So that's just where I'm at. I mean, I know they were sniffing around, who was it? Nick Easton as well. So, maybe Easton is someone they could go back to if they don't like how things look in camp. J.C. Tretter's getting floated around a lot. He's probably going to be pretty expensive. So, we'll see. But I do think they probably should add someone there, but I think it might not be until late in the season. Let's see what else we got. All right, we got a fun one here. All right, Solaire asks, who would win in a hot dog eating contest between Arthur Smith or Mike Smith? Dave, your thoughts?
I think Mike Smith, personally. I think Arthur Smith would be very sour about it.
Yeah.
And even though he wants to win, I ultimately don't think that he would do it. So,
yeah,
this is a pure like instant gut reaction to this. I just don't feel like Arthur Smith would feel like the hot dog eating contest was something he wanted to do and participate in. I think he would spend a lot of time talking about the fans don't know what it's like to be up here soaking buns, eating as many hot dogs as possible. So I think Mike Smith ultimately would carry the day.
Yeah, I think Mike Smith's enthusiasm would get him there. Like, he would be very gung-ho about it. Like, Mike Smith looks like a guy who could smash some hot dogs. You'd think Arthur Smith, I think Arthur Smith can crush some barbecue and stuff like that too, but I think Mike Smith's enthusiasm, he would just go straight for it. He wouldn't try to, fight it or bicker with it. He would just go straight at it, and that would give him the early advantage. I think Arthur Smith would gain maybe once he started, but
he may have the early advantage, but a hot dog eating contest is a young man's game. Mike Smith is 62 years old. Arthur Smith is 40, and Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith has some mass to him.
He does. That's what I'm saying.
Mass to him a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't think that. I don't think that Mike Smith's arteries would hold up so well. Eating
that'd be
that many
dangerous.
hot dogs.
Dangerous
it would
activity.
Be very
for him.
dangerous
Yeah.
for someone that's approaching senior citizen status. And,
but are we talking like both of these guys in their prime, or are we talking
question.
modern day Mike Smith?
I
was thinking I was thinking like in their primes.
Okay. In their primes, yeah.
Because
I don't know.
If we're talking about like right
specified.
now at this moment, I think Arthur Smith just has him like easily. But if we're talking about in their younger
what about
days,
at the moment they were hired by the Falcons, like from that moment?
Well, from that moment, Mike Smith was what? 48 at that point.
Yeah. So it wasn't a huge gap.
Yeah,
then,
it wasn't that big.
Yeah, the enthusiasm might be enough then to get it done. But
yeah, and also let's not forget that was before Mike Smith had some of those heart issues. We remember he had some of those heart problems that kind of got to him a little bit. And what was it? The 2010 season, 2011.
Yeah.
So pre those, then I'd give it to Mike Smith.
I think he would just be so enthusiastic about competing, and he would just get in there Yeah, and Nico says, Dan Quinn probably beat both of them, and I agree with that. I think Dan Quinn, like Mike Smith would be enthusiastic about competing, but Dan Quinn would just like come in guns blazing. He would
Dan
look
Quinn.
like what's
Dan
his
Quinn will
name?
be a
Yeah,
dynasty in that.
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That one guy, the guy that always wins the world championship. That dude just like comes in, he's
Joey
flying.
Chestnut. Joey
yeah,
Chestnut.
just flying through it. So Dan Quinn, that's not fair.
Dan Quinn would eat a plate of hot dogs just as a warm up beforehand.
Yeah, and then he'd go do stadiums. He'd be totally fine. That's Dan Quinn for you. So
maybe he should have been studying defenses or studying the opposing offense instead of doing stadiums. But
we got to go through like all of Falcons history because I feel like Norm Van Brocklin's beating everybody.
Joey Glanville, I think he would be a bit of a dark horse as well.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. He was crazy.
This should be like a deep off-season pod, like a whole pod dedicated to this. We need to like break it down with stats. We'll get the RAS scores in here for the coaches,
Yeah, we need the HDAB statistic, the hot dogs after booting,
Yes,
like
yes.
how many after you throw up, how many more you got in you.
Yeah, because if you're a rookie to it, you're not going to be able to get through that many before, and then you got to get back on the horse. So until you win these things. So yeah. Well, we'll have to come back to that, and we'll do a deep dive at some point. We'll save that for the hot dog eating contest pod. But until then, I know we got to get to some other questions too. But that was a good one, Solaire. That's a real brain teaser. We got.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, that's definitely its own episode. Yeah.
It is.
It's not.
It is.
It's not.
See, that's what I'm saying. It's great off-season content. So Solaire knew what he was doing.
People just love chaos.
They do.
Like Dave.
Yeah. All right. We got Kevin Dog from the Patreon page asking, why are we so negative about the team's prospects this year? He thinks we're going 9-8. Kevin, I'm happy for you that you feel that way. I've been hurt too many times by this team to be that optimistic this year. But why do you guys? I mean, let's just make it clear what everyone's predicting. I'm predicting 6-11. I don't remember what you had when we did our like way too early predictions. But where are you at?
I think maybe around 5-12.
Yeah, so same ballpark. And Dave, where were you at?
I was around 6-11.
Yeah.
7
right.
8.
Which, for the record, I believe their Vegas over-under total is 5. So we're all either like right on it or over. So we are optimistic, relative to like the betting landscape, which, depending on your thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, Adnan, why are you thinking that they will win fewer games this year than last year? Which, it's an interesting thing because I think it's fair that people point out that the roster as a whole is probably better. But there are some notable holes on the roster that were not there last year, and I suspect that factors into your answer, but I'll let you answer
it. This team last year went 7-2 in one-score games. That's a statistic that generally tends to even out a little bit. And this team also got by beating the likes of Zach Wilson. They lost to Tyler Heineke. They beat Daniel Jones. They beat Tua Tagovailoa. They beat Sam Darnold. They beat I forgot who was starting. Trevor Siemian for the New Orleans Saints? That was their starting quarterback.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
They beat Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, and they beat Tim Boyle and the Detroit Lions. Those were the quarterbacks. Those were the 7 quarterbacks that they beat overall. So either all rookies or, career backups. The team this year, I do think that this team will be a bit better this year talent-wise on paper. And, we're going into year 2 of the coaching staff, which is always better than when you're going into year 1. But the schedule is it's just so much more brutal. It's just so much tougher. Like last year, I was really, really happy to see the team win 7 games. I think that was about their ceiling. And this team really beat up on some disadvantaged teams last season. And that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. But there just aren't as many teams that you're supposed to beat on the schedule this year as there were last year. Like, I do not think that looking at this team, this defense, especially this offensive line, is still starting Jalen Mayfield, who was the worst guard in the NFL last year. This offensive line still has three major question marks, the same way that it did going into last season. The only two starters that you can reliably, say that, hey, these guys are solid linchpins along the offensive line, are Chris Lindstrom and Jake Matthews. And, I'm driving that Matt Hennessy hype train. I think that Matt Hennessy will prove to be a very good center this year. But you have Caleb McGarry and Jalen Mayfield as the other two offensive linemen on this team, and Matt Hennessy still also unproven in fairness. So this offensive line is one of the more below average units in the NFL. And this defense, this is still a team that had 18 sacks last year, and sure they got Ebiketie in the second round, they got D'Angelo Malone in the fourth, they got Lorenzo Carter, which is going to be a much. It should be an improved offensive line, or it should be an improved pass rush rotation. Excuse me, and maybe even a bit better than it was last year. But this is still one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. Like I really like the AJ Terrell and Casey Hayward duo, but this safety rotation with Richie Grant still being unproven, I think Jalen Hawkins will take another step, but he's not yet that solid starter. I think he can be, but this team overall, when you look at the roster, like, yes, it's better than last year, but when you look at it relative to the other teams on the schedule, this is still one of the weaker rosters in the NFL, and they will be underdogs in the vast majority of their games, and for good reason. Like I do not think I would love to be wrong. And also the other big thing that's a disadvantage this year as opposed to last year that I didn't even mention until now, the quarterback. Like, you had Matt Ryan last year as one of the very reliable starters in the NFL. Now you're going to Marcus Mariota, who has been relegated to a backup. He was a backup with the Raiders last year. He's not he I wouldn't call Marcus Mariota a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. Maybe he's fighting for that, around that 20 spot. You have him, and you have a rookie third round pick who will be making his first starts. So I I just I'd love for this team to completely, make me eat crow and to poop on my predictions, but I just don't see this team winning more than 5 or 6 games max. Like, even those 5 wins, I'm saying from a source of a bit of optimism. I'm saying that we're gonna beat the Saints in week 1 because I can't pick against the Falcons whenever they play the Saints. Uh, but I just can't see it. Like, I think this will be a transitional year, and I think the sooner that we accept that, the easier it'll be for all of us.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the big one to me is the loss of Matt Ryan. But before I get to mine, I want to give Dave a chance to weigh in here too. Dave, I know you're in the similar boat to us. What do you think about why this team's probably going to win less games this year, at least on paper?
Yeah, I think I can't add much, to what was already said. But my feeling here is that, this team, we all like this draft class a lot, I think. I think most of us do. I think we saw a year ago that, not everybody's going to pan out right away, right? Like a reason some people are so down on last year's draft class is we didn't see Richie Grant play a ton. We didn't see Mayfield looking fantastic. Even Pitts still has some room to grow. And I think the Falcons are going to count heavily on at least 2 or 3 of these guys from this rookie class. And they're going to try to get everybody involved, just like they did last year, because this roster is a work in progress. And, I just can't look at this group or even last year's group and say with confidence, they're all going to be great right now. And when you look outside of those promising draft classes and the handful of veterans you have, like Grady Jarrett, AJ Terrell, Chris Lindstrom, Jake Matthews, who are really good. This is a team with a lot of holes, a lot of stop gaps, and a lot of hopes, right? Like guys that they think can be something better than maybe what they've shown in their career to this point. Like Brian Edwards and Auden Tate, whoever it may be that they've added here, they're counting on those guys taking steps forward. in Atlanta. And when you're counting on your coaching staff taking steps forward, you're counting on a lot of players taking steps forward. You don't have a settled quarterback situation. You're in year 2 of a rebuild. You still kind of had to get it done a little bit on a budget this year. And you're facing a really tough schedule that has, a murderer's row of opponents in the early going. Like, all of that adds up to, sure, they can surprise. There's enough talent here to think if everything goes right and they stay healthy, which is something we haven't even started to talk about yet, then maybe they win more games than we expect. But I think it's good after the last, 4 or 5 years of this team falling short of our expectations repeatedly, to look at it and say, hope for the best, but kind of expect that this might be another kind of transitional year where what we're really looking for is not, I do want to see as many wins as possible, but it's not about in the win column. It's about what this team does on the field. And do they look better than last year when they got blown off the field over and over again by really good football teams and really had to squeak it out over, some lesser teams? Like, if you're more competitive in those games, even if you're not winning them, that's a good sign for next year when you can, open up the coffers, start paying these guys, and hope that these last 2 draft classes are all going to arrive at once. So to me, it's like, it's not being down on this team. Like, I don't think, Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot need to go tomorrow, or that Ridder's not going to work out. A lot of these guys are bums, etc. Like, I am probably one of the biggest defenders of the 2021 draft class out of anybody. I think there's still quite a bit of potential there that we haven't seen yet, and I think we will start seeing it this year. But I just do think that, it's going to take time. And I think we just have to recognize that, year 1 under Mike Smith, the Falcons were in the playoffs. Year 2 under Dan Quinn, they were in the Super Bowl. Like, that might not happen here, and it's okay if it doesn't.
Yeah, and the thing with Dan Quinn's was that it wasn't sustainable. Like, they sort of got hot, and then they just kept making mistakes, so they cooled off quick. But it's a different ball game when you don't have the quarterback, and that's the main reason why I'm feeling like, while I think the defense is going to be better, I think the defense will be the better unit overall for the first time in as long as I can remember. And Twitter seemed to agree. I think like 60% of fans that responded to the poll said that they thought the defense would be better. So I think the defense will be better. I think all around it'll be better. And I think against the worst teams in their schedule, the defense might actually look like good. Like, they could actually be a good defense. I think they're going to struggle against really good offenses, but even good defenses do that in the NFL. It's just how it goes. I think it's a tall order to ask this offense to be better without Matt Ryan under any circumstances. Like, I think the wide receivers this year are going to be better. The run game should be better, but it all comes down to the offensive line. So like, you have a downgrade at quarterback, you lose your franchise guy, you go to Marcus Mariota. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it's fine, but I don't think Mariota's all just going to be better than Matt Ryan because he can move. Like, that might help him keep from getting annihilated behind the offensive line, but I don't think it's just going to make him a better quarterback than Matt Ryan. And then the big thing is the offensive line. You guys talked about it. Like, we're really doing this. It's Jalen Mayfield and Matt Hennessy again. Caleb McGarry, extremely unreliable. At least they did something about McGarry. Like, I think Jermaine Ifedi is a perfectly fine starting right tackle. He's not going to be great, but he's really solid. He's not going to be bad. He's going to be a rock-solid, steady right tackle. Perfect backup right tackle. But spot starter, stopgap for a year, that's fine. So I think at right tackle, and Elijah Wilkinson I think is interesting too. I mean, he hasn't gotten a ton of opportunities, but potential swing tackle. He's young. I mean, like, he has some guard flexibility. So I think the tackle group is fine. We'll have to see what happens next year, obviously, at right tackle. But like, that group they didn't address the biggest problem, which was left guard and center. Like, those were the problem spots, and they didn't do anything there. And maybe they drafted Justin Schaefer, but like, it's rare that a 6th-round rookie is going to come in and provide, starting caliber play. Maybe Justin Schaefer is going to hit the ground running, and that's fine. But I think more than likely he's going to be a backup. So like, maybe they're gonna make us all look silly, and like Jalen Mayfield and Matt Hennessy are great. I think Hennessy probably gonna be okay. I think he was someone who at least flashed high end run blocking at times, and certainly needs to continue to work on his game. But like he was serviceable through a lot of the year. Jalen Mayfield at times was just like a turnstile. Like it was really, really bad. So I just really don't get how you can not even bring in competition, like serious competition. I mean, they basically cleared the runway for him. Unless you think Drew Dahlman's going to play left guard, which, maybe that's the player we're not really talking about because this regime drafted Drew Dahlman too. They seem to like him. Maybe Drew Dahlman's going to start at center. I don't care. But out of those three guys, like, one of them needs to, we need at least one to be good and ideally two to be like average. So, we'll see how it goes. But I just really, it's extremely risky. And that's why I don't have a lot of faith in the offense being great. And, the defense I think will be better. But if the offense takes a step back, I just don't see this team beating all these good teams in their schedule with just this really below average offense and a defense that's probably going to be like average, which is a big step up from where they've been, but like that's not enough to win in the NFL. Just an average defense and a below average offense, like that's going to get you 6 wins, So that's where we're at with the team. I hope we're wrong. I hope Marcus Mariota is like the next, coming of Patrick Mahomes. He just needs, he's the next Ryan Tannehill. He just catches fire. Smith benches him and Smith redeems him. That would be a fun story, right? Or Desmond Ridder's just awesome. That'd be fine too. But these just aren't very high percentile chance things. So that's why I would just encourage you to probably bet a little lower than you're thinking and then be pleasantly surprised if things go well instead of thinking they're going to win 10 games. And then when they win 6, you're like, oh, wow, this team sucks. It's like, well, we tried to tell you, and now you're upset. Whereas the rest of us are going to be like, oh, if they win 6 games in the first 10 weeks, we're going to be like, oh, this is great. This is nice.
If they're 6-4.
Yeah. Yeah. We're all going to be riding high. We're going to have fun either way. Like, we're predicting that they're not going to be that great. If they're great, we're going to be having fun. I think the people that are predicting them to win 10 games, if they're struggling, you're going to be like, why isn't this team good? And you're probably going to have a worse time. So just, do what you want to do. I have no problem if you think they're going to be good,
I would love for them to be 6-4 after the first 10 games. Like, yeah. I think that team is competing for the playoffs legitimately at that point. I'm skeptical about it, but hopefully I'm completely wrong.
Yeah, I hope so too. I hope they're really good. All right, we got one question from Brandon Brass before we sign off tonight. Brandon wants to know our thoughts on UDFA wide receiver Taishan James. Do we see him making the roster? Brandon, I know you've been itching to get this one answered. Yeah, go back and if you haven't listened yet, I had Thor Nystrom on and we talked about all the UDFAs. That's on the channel. So I did discuss it a little bit, but the wide receiver depth chart is actually really crowded now. So I think it'll be tough for him to make the roster. And I think that James is sort of that prototypical practice squad receiver. Like, I think he has a really good chance of sticking there, but I think it'll be tough for him to make the roster just because, like, if they keep 5, they're cutting someone. Like, they're cutting Kaderil Hodge or Auden Tate or Demir Burr or something like that. Like, if they keep 6, it's just like this chart is already kind of stacked. Like, when they added Bryan Edwards to this group, let's go through the top 5 real quick. Just a quick thought experiment. Okay, so we got Drake London, Bryan Edwards as your 1 and 2. Then it's whatever, take your pick between Demir Bird, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Auden Tate. That's 5 right there. Kaderil Hodge is probably the best special teams player, so that would be 6. But
Geronimo Allison.
Geronimo Allison just
very,
got added.
very experienced.
Yes.
Austin Trammell, who was in training camp last year.
Yep.
And who, Austin Trammell.
He returns kicks. Yeah.
Yeah, but he also has a bit of a leg up. He's had a whole, year to work on or to learn the playbook.
Yeah.
And
they clearly liked him. They kept him around. So
yeah, was he on the practice squad?
He was for the whole season. And that's not even counting Frank Darby, the draft pick from last year. That's what I'm saying. Taishan James can have a good training camp and still not make the roster.
Yeah, I really like Taishan James. I'm personally rooting for him to make the roster more than any of these other guys because he did an interview with our own Evan
He did.
for the Falcoholic. So he's immediately my favorite wide receiver in the wide receiver room.
Yep.
But yeah, like you said, it's gonna be tough. Like this what the wide receiver competition for that last wide receiver spot is always so heated, and it's always my favorite competition or among my favorite
Yeah.
competitions
Yeah.
to watch in the preseason. And this year it it's as competitive this year as it's ever been over the past few years. I think the last time it was really this competitive was when Olamide Zacchaeus made it over Christian Blake and
Yeah.
that collection of wide receivers, I think in 2018.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, like I think you already have your top three set because they're not going to cut Brian Edwards, who they just
No.
traded
No.
for.
Mhm.
Drake London was your first round pick. Olamide Zacchaeus has been here the longest,
Mhm.
and you want some of that continuity. And then beyond that, like I think Auden Tate can have a really good year with the Falcons. I
Yeah.
think he'll make it as that fourth wide receiver, and then you
I
just
mean,
have a
Bird is the
bloodbath.
speed guy.
That,
Like he's the
that
fastest guy on the roster, probably.
you
You're
you
running
have an absolute
4.27.
bloodbath. Like you said,
Yeah.
Hodge special teams. It matters if you're buried on that depth chart down there. Bird is a speed guy. Geronimo Allison probably has. He may have the most experience among all of these guys who are competing for those last couple spots, not counting the top three. I mean, even
Not counting like
he
the
has,
veterans. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Like
yeah,
Bird has
yeah,
played like 8
yeah.
seasons and that, but like other than those guys, like yeah.
Yeah, I mean Darby was your sixth rounder last year, but he really showed nothing in training camp or in the preseason last year. But Frank Darby was still a guy that was drafted by this regime.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's going to be really really difficult. But hopefully if he doesn't make the roster, hopefully he'll be on the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them like last year they kept like 3 or 4 receivers on the practice squad, and the 16-man practice squad's coming back. So you can do that. You can carry a bunch of receivers if you want.
Yeah, and for the record, I don't think Darby will make it. But I think that when you are drafted by a regime, they tend to give you a few more chances, even
Yeah.
even if it was on day three, because nobody likes to admit that they were completely wrong on a draft
Right.
pick.
Yeah, and it's like a 6th-round pick. It's not like a massive investment, but I agree. Like they're gonna want that pick to look better, but I just don't see him making. I mean, Dave, what do you think about this depth chart? I mean, it's stacked, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because this was a position that we were kind of celebrating sarcastically the Hodge signing, even though he's a really good special teamer because he was like the only receiver they had added
Yeah.
post Calvin Ridley. I think more than any other position on the roster, they've done a great job of turning it over and adding talent. And yeah, for me, I also like James. He's somebody that I think could have a bright future in Atlanta. I think he's a practice squad candidate this year for sure because there's a lot of guys competing for not all that many spots. It's the same good problem the Falcons have at corner, except of course at corner you have AJ Terrell at the top of the depth chart and a guy like Casey Hayward, more proven options. But it's the same kind of thing. You have 10 or 11 guys competing for 5 or 6 spots, and a couple of guys that you kind of will wish had made it won't. So, and I think that you could very well see James and Darby on the practice squad this year.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a star-studded group at receiver, but it's really deep. Like there's really like going to be some tough decisions being made at receiver, and it's not like do they even keep 6? Like if they keep a third quarterback, like if they want to keep Franks on the roster, they carried 4 running backs through most of last year. They're going to carry a fullback too. They're going to carry 4 tight ends. Like, it gets to the point where like if you keep 6 receivers, you're going to have to carry like if you're keeping 3 quarterbacks and 6 receivers and all that other stuff I said, like are you going to only keep 8 offensive line? Or are you going to go down to like 23 defensive players? Like, I mean, I think they're going to keep more offensive players slightly, but it's like it gets real. The math gets pretty tough. So I mean, we'll have to see what happens. I think it's possible they could keep only 5 receivers. That does seem to be. I mean, and that would make really tough decisions happen. So it's crazy how much I would say like the 1 and 2 spots are still like questionable. You know, I think Drake London certainly could be that guy, and Brian Edwards could be that guy. But like wide receiver 3 through 6 is like all of a sudden like, oh, we actually have good wide receiver 3 through 6 here. You know, we have actually guys that are capable of playing these roles, and you know, actually a bunch of guys that might be wide receiver 3-4 types, as opposed to like a bunch of wide receiver 5s that are filling out the depth chart. So there's a lot of tough decisions to be made there.
It will give us something to look at when we're doing our preseason play-by-play and color commentary in those 3 weeks, where you know it's going to be the fourth quarter, but it's like, yeah, no, well, we're still going strong. We need to see who's going to be that last wide receiver on the depth chart.
Yeah, I mean, we always do. That's our specialty. This will be the most exciting preseason in forever, because even if Arthur Smith doesn't play the starters, he said he's going to.
He will.
But he said he's going to.
He
but
knows he was wrong. He knows I was right.
Yes, it was odd and on this whole time. Like, we're going to get to watch Ridder, even if like Mariota barely plays, we're going to get to watch Ridder a bunch. So it's like, this will hopefully be the best like quarterback play we've seen, you know, in a long time.
I just can't wait for the overreactions. I cannot wait for the overreactions to
like,
happen.
Mariota will play one series, throw a pick, and then Ridder will come in and throw 2 touchdowns, and everyone will be like, oh my God, Ridder's a god.
Dave, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is it that this fan base will overreact?
There's not even a high enough number, like 10. Like you're
more than that.
I can't count that high. Look, but you know, we do this every single year, and God love us. You know, we're not a unique fan base this way, but like, how many times like did I get burned when I first started this site by guys like Brandon Harvey, who looked awesome for a couple of preseason games? I got super invested. Like, we are not only going to overreact to people who are going to make the roster doing really well or really badly, but there's going to be 1 or 2 like preseason darlings who are going to be the next Bernard Reedy. They're going to be the next JD McKissick, who they should have kept. You know, whoever it may be, we will overreact. I will put that chance at 1,000%.
Not just the preseason. Just wait for the guys to be catching balls in shorts and, you know, a short sleeve T-shirt. And in training camp, before training camp, we'll be overreacting to that as well.
Oh yeah, there's gonna be a lot of overreactions, and I'm looking forward to it. I know we had some more,
but
questions
it's part of the
in.
process.
Yeah,
you know,
it
wouldn't be the same without the overreaction.
No, that's what makes it fun. Yeah, I'm sorry, Noah, that we didn't get to yours. Just if you're here tomorrow, just throw that in to the chat once we go on. Maybe we can kick things off with that question. I'll try to remember it about the cap space. But yeah, we're already like 15 minutes over, so I don't want to keep the guests too long. But we do appreciate all the patrons for hanging out with us tonight. For those of you watching the show after taping, if you want to become a patron, very easy. You just go to patreon.com/Falcoholic Live to sign up. We got all kinds of cool stuff on there. Access to the podcast version of Falcoholic Live, ad-free, ultimate, you know, priceless quality recording. And now you get access to all the Falcoholic podcast ad-free, high-quality recordings as well, since I've taken that over. So you get double the podcast episodes, you get these great Q&A sessions, and you're going to get what seems to be the most important thing to everyone, which is access to the Falcoholic fantasy leagues. I know we had one last year. I already know, since we're up to like 25 patrons, we're probably going to have more than one this year. Adnan has already pledged his support to join. Yes. So, you know, you're going to have Adnan in there too. Yeah.
I will be in as well.
Okay, so. Dave will be there too. So, you know, it's all of a sudden it's getting really spicy in here.
I am the Atlanta Falcons of the Falcoholic fantasy community, so you'll
poor
enjoy
Dave.
that.
I don't know why every time it seems like Dave ends up at the bottom, but, you know.
I won a couple of years ago, but that was our writer.
You did, yeah.
I mostly I'm a bridesmaid and never a bride. So
yeah, I mean that's usually how it works. I've as long as you make the playoffs in fantasy, I feel like that's pretty good. You know, if you make the playoffs consistently, it's just like the real NFL. It's a lot of luck. You know, a lot of luck. At least that's what we tell ourselves when we cry.
No, it's a lot of luck.
Yeah,
it's even more luck than the actual NFL. In the NFL, you actually have like, you know, what you do can actually affect the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. All right, guys, we really appreciate everyone for tuning in. Before we take off, want to thank my wonderful co-host this evening. First of all, Adnan Ikic. He's at Say Which Way on the Twitters. Adnan, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Yeah, just go to the Falcoholic, and we have that new roundtable that we're doing. That I've actually about to be filling in right now for week 2, talking about our prediction, going game by game this
Yes,
season.
against the Rams. A lot of
Yes.
victories
Oh,
getting
yeah.
predicted, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, yes, so many. And yeah, later on in the off season, I'm gonna start a roundtable series talking about our predictions for player of the year, rookie of the year. Some optimistic stuff, because I feel like I've been pessimistic enough today, and you know, I'm just I'm just the Grinch right now, predicting 5 wins. Saying that the team isn't going to be that good this season, saying we just need to accept it. So yeah, I'll try to make up for that with some optimistic articles.
I'm
and
going,
roundtables.
yeah. We're gonna write, flowery stuff too, not just because they practice at Flowery Branch. Like we're gonna write some positive things too. But look, I can't predict a win against the Rams on the road. Like I'm not gonna do that. Like that's how like I'm just lying to you if I were to predict that. Like it's like it could happen certainly, but like to predict it is like another thing entirely. Like I acknowledge that it could happen that any given Sunday and all that, but
Yeah, but the good part about games like that is when you go into it, you're not really expecting to win it.
yeah.
So yeah, anything is gravy.
Oh yeah, if
if
you're
you-
like just competitive, no one's gonna expect and it's gonna be that way in week 1 too. The way that betting markets think about the Falcons, like we're gonna walk into that game against the Saints, everyone's gonna pick the Saints, and if the Falcons win, it's just gonna be gravy. And if they lose, it's like
apparently
everyone
everyone but
thought.
Dave
Yeah.
and myself will pick
Yeah.
the Saints.
Yeah, well, but I'm gonna pick the revenge win in New Orleans to knock them out of the playoffs, the playoff race later in the season. That's what I'm gonna
So you'll pick
predict.
them to win in New Orleans, but not at home against New Orleans.
Because it's week 1. Did you read? I wrote 2 paragraphs. It was very, it was very detailed. There was a lot of information, but yeah, it's
I wrote
unforgivable.
one sentence. I wrote one sentence in that roundtable.
Yeah, pain, just pain. Yeah, but thanks for coming on, Aldo. We appreciate you. Also with us tonight, Dave Cho at the Falcoholic himself. Dave, anything you'd like to plug before we sign off?
Just the fine work we're doing at the Falcoholic every day in, day out. Except for the occasional off-season Saturday, we do have things to do. But it's stay tuned. It's obviously one of the quietest parts of the off-season, but we have a lot of forward-thinking stuff, and we'll be looking forward to having a lot to talk about come OTAs, minicamp, and especially training camp. It's going to be a really exciting summer because there's so many starting jobs up for grabs, so many roster spots up for grabs, and certainly more compelling competition than there was at some spots last year. So stay tuned.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I will be attempting once again to get down to training camp. I'm trying to go all 8 days. I don't know exactly how many days it is. I think it's 8 days. So, we'll see how that goes. I don't think there will be a problem on the credential side. On the financial side, we're going to be starting the fundraiser for that. Good plug for that next month. So if you guys want to contribute to the get Kevin to training camp alive and not in a box fund, that will be starting next month as well. So that's something else we can look forward to. But yeah, we're not too far off now. Just a little over 2 months. So maybe a little under 2 months, I guess, because it's usually like July 28th-ish. This is when we get the first training camp day. So maybe a little under 2 months then. So it's getting there. We're getting there, guys. The relevant football information is coming soon. And by soon, I mean 2 months. But hey, it could be worse. It could be 3 months. So we're getting a little bit closer here and there. But
also, the Falcons are going to make you mad enough this season. Enjoy the time off.
yeah, cherish it while you can. Cherish it while you can. So, yeah, guys, really appreciate all of you. Thanks again, patrons. Thanks again, everyone else, for tuning in. We will see you guys tomorrow night, Wednesday, for the next episode of Falcoholic Live. Until then, guys, have a great night. We will see you next time, folks.